Now available in paperback and Kindle Unlimited, The Man Crisis. Learn why so many men are struggling to find their way in an increasingly gynocentric world in The Man Crisis. Get your copy of The Man Crisis in paperback and Kindle Unlimited today. When I take a critical examination of Robert Crimo Jr., the father of the Highland Park mass shooter, Robert Crimo III, he fits the pattern and profile for beta male fathers that I talk about in my book, The Man Crisis. And the only thing worse than raising a child in a single mother household is raising a child in a household with a beta male father. And the reason why a household with a beta male father is worse than a household with a single mother is because no one is leading in the home with the beta male father. Now, the Most High Living God made the man to be the head of the family. Unfortunately, when you're dealing with beta males, they don't want to be a head of household under God's natural order. No, beta male fathers, they abdicate their power because they refuse to take any sort of responsibility over their homes. And because these men abdicate their responsibilities as being a head of household, their homes oftentimes turn into chaos. And that's exactly what happened here with Robert Crimo Jr.'s household. His entire household turned into chaos because he refused to be a head of household and he refused to impose order and structure over his home. Now, your beta males don't like to impose order and structure over their homes because your beta males fear conflict. Now, in order to run a family, a father has to understand that he's going to be dealing with conflict every day, whether it be with his wife, whether it be with his children, whether it be with the employees he's working with at his job. A father deals with conflict every day, and part of being a leader is knowing how to resolve conflict. Unfortunately, your beta male does not want to go out here and deal with conflict because your beta male wants to live in a smooth world. And in the beta male's smooth world, he doesn't want to deal with any sort of conflicts, any sort of problems, any sort of obstacles. No, he wants to just be able to come into a world that is extremely smooth, where there are no problems at all. And that is not how a father deals with life. No, a father, when he comes into a family unit, he knows that it's going to be a rough thing, and he knows that he has to put in that work in order for his family to grow and be successful. Unfortunately, when you're dealing with a beta male father, he wants to go out here and have children out of to get social currency, or he goes out here and he has children just because it happens. He doesn't really think about how he's going to care for his children's emotional needs. No, all he thinks about is what he's going to get out of the whole situation, which is basically social currency for himself. Now, the big problem with beta male fathers, in addition to abdicating their leadership role, is that they are emotionally unavailable. So in addition to them just abdicating their power as the head of household, being the leader and authority figure, abdicating his leadership role and his authority over the family, what your beta male father also does is he becomes emotionally unavailable. So many of your beta male fathers, oftentimes, they are detached from the family, disconnected from the family. Yes, he's physically there, but he's not emotionally and actively engaged with his family. And this is where the problems with Robert Crimo III come out. because what happened with Robert Cremo III to make him as dysfunctional as he was the fact that his father had no emotional engagement with him. He had no personal connection with him. And this is something that really damages children who, as related to relationships with beta male fathers, because yes, the beta male father is physically there, but he never really actively engages with the child. And because he doesn't actively engage with the child does not bond with him. And that's what happened with your Robert Cremo III. Yes, he was in the home with his dad, but his dad really had no connection with him because his father was afraid of having to deal with the conflicts that relate to raising a son. And that's why that boy became so twisted, because his father, yes, he was again physically there, but he had no real engagement. And that's why beta male fathers are terrible, because beta male fathers basically are just like a pair of pants in the home, but that pair of pants never sits down and talks to their child. That pair of pants never finds out what their kids are interested in, and these fathers really don't watch their children's behavior to see if something is wrong with him. That's something that makes a beta male father, again, a terrible parent, because he's just thinking, oh, I just have to be here out of obligation, and he's only here because it keeps up an appearance. It's not that he's here because he really wants to be there. Now, this is one of the reasons why your beta male fathers oftentimes don't get any sort of respect, and that's why there was so much chaos in that Cremo household in Highland Park. Now, your Robert Cremo Jr., as I see it from what I've read, he had some serious issues with his wife, and those serious issues with his wife came from the fact that he was a beta male, and this beta male just did not get any respect from his wife because, again, he did not take a leadership role in his home. Now, the reason why these beta male fathers don't get respect from their wives is because they don't go out here and assert themselves as authority figures. And because they don't assert themselves as authority figures, what these women do is they start to get frustrated because they are looking to the man to be the leader and the head of household, and they're looking to that man to regulate and manage his home. Unfortunately, again, because the beta male wants a smooth world and doesn't want to deal with any sort of conflict, he doesn't go out here and regulate the home. No, like many of the beta males who run companies, they abdicate and give all of the power to the wife. And what happens is the wife winds up becoming frustrated as she's overwhelmed with all of these responsibilities that she's been given in this codependent relationship. And as he's looking for her to make all of the decisions, she's frustrated and overwhelmed because she has to take on all of these responsibilities while he sits there and refuses to deal with any of the problems. And this is what leads to the woman starting to become angry, and she starts to lose respect for him. And that's what I believe was the core of the domestic violence as related to your Robert Cremo Jr., as related to the alleged screwdriver incident where he allegedly was stabbed with a screwdriver. This woman was frustrated because she was looking to him to be the head of household. She was looking for him to regulate the home. She was looking for him to help discipline and raise the children. And this male was just sitting there passively, not ever dealing with any sort of conflict, and he was looking for her to lead in the whole situation. And this, I believe, overwhelmed this woman, and it led to them having much of the issues in their relationship. Because when women get involved with beta males, they oftentimes are looking for that man to go out here and be the leader. They're looking for them to establish structure. They're looking for them to set order. But these men are too scared to go out here and establish structure and order over their home. And because these men are too scared to establish structure and order over their home, this leads to the home turning into a chaotic environment. And that chaotic environment is something that leads to many of these women just going and themselves going out of control. That's why they go out here and escalate their behavior, like allegedly your Robert Cremo Jr.'s wife did when she attacked him, because she was seeing that this man refused to go out here as he was refused to set order, and he refused to set boundaries as related to how the members of his family would carry and conduct themselves, because the father's role is to go out here and again be the one who sets the tone. He is the one who establishes order, and he is the one who establishes structure over his home, and he is the one who regulates the behavior of his wife and his children, because how they behave reflects on him. That is something the beta male father doesn't understand. He doesn't understand how the dysfunctional behavior of his children reflects on him, and how that behavior shows the world how he's a weak man. Because when you have a man whose wife is argumentative and out of control, and a son who is acting erratic, that really shows that the father of that home is not out here leading and establishing order over his home. It really shows that the family is running him, and he is not running the family. And that is a basic feature of a home with a beta male father. A home with a beta male father is one where everybody is running him and he is not running his home. And when he is not running his home, the family members who are under his charge are acting crazy, like they say Robert Cremo's wife was allegedly acting, and the way many people say that your Robert Cremo III was acting crazy. And again, this goes back to the father not being in charge of his home, and this just shows how ineffective a leader he is, because a father's role is to be on top of his wife, on top of his children, and make sure everything is running right. But your Robert Cremo Jr., he says that the shooting took him by complete surprise, and it took him by complete surprise because he was an incompetent leader, and that's a standard feature of a beta male father. Now, this beta male father sat there, and as his son was going out here putting a series of stickers on a car and a number 47 on the side, he's not looking at that and saying, hey, that's a red flag for some dysfunctional behavior. And then there's paintings on his wall of his home of a figure with a happy face and a gun, and he's not saying, hey, this is a red flag for behavior that is not right for my teenage child to be participating in. Again, beta male fathers, they are in the home, but they do nothing at all, and that's what makes them worse than being in a home with a single mother, because at least possibly the single mother will notice the behavior that's wrong with their child and try to do something about it. But the beta male father, he's sitting there watching his son putting paintings on a wall with a guy with a gun, putting teeth in a number 47 on a car, collecting knives, talking about killing people, and he's just sitting there acting like nothing is happening. And that's what's really troubling about beta male fathers. They see the trouble, but because they're too scared to confront their children go on to participate in disturbing behavior in front of them that in some ways is rebellious. And what they're looking for the man to do is to push back by setting a boundary, but the beta male is too scared to set boundaries for their sons, and this is what leads to the escalation of their behavior, where they're seeking more attention, and people are seeing that this male is participating in erratic behavior. He's attempted suicide, but he's sitting there acting like absolutely nothing is happening because he's abdicated all of his power and he basically feels emasculated as a man, and he doesn't want to take that responsibility as a man to regulate his home. Because in the aftermath of all of these incidents, I mean, you have a male talking about he wants to kill people, you have a male collecting knives and the police taking the knives from him, and instead of him going out here and confronting his son about his disturbing and erratic behavior, what this beta male does is say that the knives were his and take the knives back. That's, again, textbook beta male behavior, because the beta male doesn't want to take responsibility for him abdicating his power, leading to the dysfunctional behavior of his son. So instead of him going out here and taking responsibility for this boy's behavior and taking responsibility for this boy, no, what he does is he goes out here and takes the knives and says that they're his and takes them back, because that's going to make his world smooth, where he doesn't have to deal with any conflicts or obstacles in his way. So he doesn't want to deal with any problems with his son, who, if he had dealt with these problems, he may have saved 7 lives and kept 30 people from being injured. No, he doesn't want to deal with that because he doesn't want to deal with any problems. So he hid that whole situation. He thought it was over with. And then the same dysfunctional son comes back to him talking about how he wants a gun. And this beta male, instead of him asking tough questions like a father would, like, what do you need a gun for? And really thinking, hey, if this boy is suicidal, I don't really need to be giving him a gun. I need to really take a look at these behaviors and see how these behaviors are dangerous. He's not really thinking about this because he doesn't want to deal with the reality that his whole family is messed up. And what he does is he continues to enable the dysfunctional behavior of his son because he doesn't want to deal with the conflicts of having to confront his son. So since he doesn't want to deal with the conflict of confronting his son, what he does is he signs to sponsor him to get a gun, not looking at it critically and saying, hey, this boy has talked about killing people, he's talked about killing his family, he's talked about committing suicide, he's attempted suicide. The last thing a father who truly cares about his son will do is go out here and sign for him to get a gun, knowing that he is suicidal, knowing that he has talked about killing family members, talked about killing people. The last thing a father who truly cares about his son is going to do is go out here and buy his son or sponsor his son for a firearm. Unfortunately, when you're dealing with a beta male, they are in such denial about their whole dysfunctional family situation, they will go out here and sign off to enable their sons to go out here and buy a loaded weapon, like in the case of Robert Crimo III. They will go out here and do this because they don't want to deal with the conflict of disciplining their son. They don't want to deal with the conflict of confronting their son. They don't want to assert male authority on their son. So they don't want to deal with this boy. So they think, oh, I'll just give him this weapon and think that, oh, this will be perfectly fine for him to have. And again, it just shows how beta male fathers abdicate their power, abdicate their authority, and refuse to regulate their homes, and how that can impact all of us here in America. When you have a beta male father, he doesn't go out here and do what he needs to do, and because he doesn't do what he needs to do, this is what puts other people's lives in jeopardy, because the sons that they have in their home, they don't learn a healthy example of manhood, because all of their dysfunction comes from his really troubled and deeply dysfunctional example of manhood. And that's where your Robert Crimo Jr. really messed up his son. And he messed up his son worse than a single mother does to her son, because it's his model of manhood that led to this male becoming a man in crisis. It's this man enabling his son by seeing them being violent and then claiming that the knives were his first. It was him denying that his son had serious issues when he's talking about killing people, and him sitting there making excuses for this boy and going out here and signing off on him having a gun. This beta male basically made this whole situation, I believe, worse by all of his coddling, all of his enabling, and his refusal to engage his son the way a father goes out here and engages his son. Because a father's job is to establish structure on his family. It's a father's job to establish discipline on his children. And it's a father's job to go out here and say no to his wife, no to his children, and let them know where the boundaries are, because that's what fathers do as God's head and God's steward. Their job is to manage their home, and their job is to make sure that their home is under the standards of the living God. But this beta male, he's too scared to take that power. No, he's afraid that if he stands up, people will run away, and that's not the case as related to a true to the game father. No, a true to the game father understands he has to take a stand, and he has to make sure that his house is under the standards of the Most High. He has to make sure that his wife is acting right. He has to make sure that his children are acting right, because he's not answering to the state. No, he's answering to God, and he wants his house in order, because if his house is in order, then it can do its work under God's natural order. And again, he is accountable to God as the head and the steward, because this is the charge he has been put in place for. But the beta male father doesn't want that place. No, he doesn't want that responsibility. No, in a lot of cases, when it comes down to the beta male father, he in many cases doesn't even want the kids, because what he wants is social currency with others. So that's why he abdicates as related to his leadership role, because he doesn't want to be in an interdependent relationship with God and his wife. No, he wants to be in a place where he can basically be like a child, and whenever he's like a child, that's why everything falls apart. And when you look at this Robert Crimo Jr., he is a textbook beta male father. His businesses were out of order. His house was out of order. And this individual thought he was more important than what he was, because a lot of beta males think that they're more important than what they are, where he was thinking, oh, I can run for mayor. But how can you run for mayor when your house isn't in order? That's a critical question I would like to ask Robert Crimo Jr. How did you think you could be the mayor of Highland Park when your entire house was out of order? Yes, you had two businesses, and yes, you had two homes, but everything was in complete disarray. So how could you think you could run municipal offices when you couldn't even run your home? That's something that many beta males never think about, because all they feel is they want to have power, but they don't understand that with power comes great responsibility. And if you don't want to take responsibility, then you need to leave power alone. Unfortunately, these men never take power over their homes, and because they don't take power over their homes are basically chaotic, like the Crimo Jr. household was. That household was in complete chaos and disarray, and the reason why it was in complete chaos and disarray was because your Robert Crimo Jr. basically was not a leader of his home. He was not a head of his household, and his household was running itself, and his household basically ran itself straight into the ground when this man's son went out here and participated in the Highland Park mass shooting. And what's really sad about this whole situation is that this beta male continues to remain in denial, saying that he doesn't regret sponsoring his son for that gun. And that really again shows how deeply out of touch a beta male father can be, because here is your son who basically murdered 7 people and injured 30 others, and you're sitting there saying you don't regret sponsoring him for a gun, even though the boy was suicidal, even though the boy had talked about killing people. You don't want to take any responsibility, but sadly, this is par for the course when it comes to beta male fathers. They don't really take any accountability for their children. They don't take any accountability for their families, and they don't see how badly this reflects on them. No, these beta males, they wind up in denial, and like this individual talking about how he's going to keep his head up when he needs to keep his head down, because he should be ashamed of the fruits of his family, because this child of the corn came up like dysfunctional like this because he allowed them to grow up like stalks, because he didn't give his son any sort of guidance. He didn't give his son any sort of structure. He didn't establish any sort of order, and he didn't demand anything of his son. I mean, if this man owned 2 restaurants and he's sitting there and his son isn't working at one of them, that's a red flag for me, because most fathers who own businesses, their son is working in that business to teach him character, and that's what this boy didn't get, any discipline or any character. That's why he was talking about he was Awake the rapper, putting facial tattoos on himself, because the father did not set order on him and set boundaries for him and let him know, look, you're not going to be putting no tattoos on your body. You're not going to be doing this foolishness. No, a father puts order on his son, and he puts structure and discipline on his son, because this is how you develop a boy into a man. But when you have a beta male, he doesn't go out here and develop discipline and order on his son, and that's why we get a man in crisis. And we get a man in crisis that's worse than a boy in a single mother household, because the model of manhood he's seeing is so dysfunctional that he thinks that this is normal. But the whole thing is, this dysfunctional man goes out here and raises a boy to become a man in crisis, because this is the model for manhood he receives. And when he receives this model of manhood, what it does is it teaches him dysfunctional is normal. And people are sitting there thinking, oh, this boy was mentally ill. No, I don't believe he was mentally ill. I believe he grew up in dysfunction, learned dysfunction was perfectly normal from watching his mother and his father, and he thought, oh, I can go out here and participate in erratic behavior because mom and dad participate in erratic behavior. And the main reason for this is because the man refuses to assert order in his home, refuses to assert authority over his wife and his children, and refuses to go out here and establish a structure for how his family behaves, because he doesn't want to take, again, any responsibility for anything. And that's what makes a beta male father worse than a single mother, because the single mother can excuse herself by saying that she's just by herself. But what's sad is this man doesn't want to be a man. No, he wants to have the social currency of a man. He wants to go out here and, again, be the man for other people outside of the family, but he doesn't know how to be a man and be a father for his children. So when I look at this case of this Robert Crimo Jr., he is the textbook example of a beta male father, and it shows that just having a man in the home just isn't enough. You need to have a man as your head of household and not a man in crisis, because if you have a man in crisis as your head of household, it's worse than having no parents at all in that home. Now, if you want to learn more about why beta males are extremely dysfunctional and learn about what makes them behave in such a dysfunctional fashion, you can pick up my book, The Man Crisis, on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find The Man Crisis on Smashwords, the iBookstore, and Google Play. And if you want to see me do more men's issues videos like this, you can donate to my Patreon, my PayPal, or my Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and Kindle, Stop Simping in Cyberspace. Learn how to avoid predatory females like Instagram models and e-girls in their virtual con games with Stop Simping in Cyberspace. Get your copy of Stop Simping in Cyberspace in paperback and Kindle today. Now available for the first time in paperback, Why 70% of Black Women Are Single. Learn all the reasons why so many Black women can't find a husband and why 70% of Black women are single. Get your copy of Why 70% of Black Women Are Single on Amazon.com today.